Hello everybody, this is Freddy with Freddy Can Fly. Today we are going to start part 1 of our Build Tips and Tricks video series. In video 1 I wanted to cover something pretty basic that I've been getting requested to do quite a bit. And we're going to take a look at how to properly lube and grease the one-way bearing on either your electric or nitro based helicopter. So with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the materials you will need. Okay guys, so obviously first on our list of items needed is our one-way gear along with the tail drive gear complete with the one-way bearing center hub. Now this one belongs to a 600 nitro kit, but they're all pretty damn close to the same setup, so we need that. You're also going to need some white lithium grease. I'm using the Align brand that comes with most of their kits, but I believe you can use like Tri-Flow or maybe go down to an AutoZone and pick out any sort of white lithium grease. Don't use water-based or a silicone or anything like that. Just use white lithium grease. It's pretty easy to get your hands on. And you'll need quite a bit, but this little tube will last me quite a few helis. We're also going to go ahead and need a napkin or some sort of a towel to keep your fingers clean. That way you're not getting grease all over the house and also all over your helicopter. So this is basically all we'll need. I'm going to go ahead and break apart my main gear and we'll come back, take a look at it, and we'll get started. Okay guys, so as you can see, we've went ahead and we've broken apart our main gear. Okay, now most main gears with the auto rotation system are going to consist of the main gear here, which the main hub will attach to, that's got the one-way bearing. You're going to have your tail drive gear that drives the tail. Once the motor has been killed out, it'll grab onto the one-way bearing and still spin the tail, whereas this motor or this gear will disengage. We've also got this little extension sleeve that slides on the main shaft. On the 600 nitro, this will fit down into the third bearing block. And then we've got the little spacer shim that goes in between to give these two gears enough clearance so that they mesh properly. So we're going to go ahead and start with this gear. Typically what you want to do is check all of your screws in here and make sure that they all are properly seated and tightened. Also take note to the back where they protrude out. I've always had a little bit of flashing from where the screws extend out, and you don't want to leave that in there and let the gears chew it up. So double check that on every gear. And we're going to start off by greasing this gear right here in the center. This is known as the one-way bearing. So go ahead and get your white lithium grease ready and let's grease it up. Alright guys, so first off what I usually do is, if you look inside, I don't know if you can see it on my camera, but there's always a little bit of grease in there. Don't ever pass this off as enough grease. You can never over grease this one-way bearing. You don't want to under grease it because, and especially don't ever run it dry. You can cause bearing seizures that way, seize up during flight, cause all kinds of problems. So keep her nice and greased. Every maybe 20 to 30 flights, give it a good re-greasing. It takes a couple seconds to do. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take our grease, our white lithium grease, and I'm going to go ahead and put a couple lines on the inside of that bearing, maybe 4, 5, or 6. So what we're going to do is we're going to squirt some inside here. Bear with me while I do this, and I'll show you what it looks like. And just gob it in there, guys. Don't be afraid to use too much grease. So we got some lines in there. Now, they don't quite look like perfect lines, so don't judge. But you can see how much I've applied inside there. Okay? Get about that much, more, maybe a little less, it's up to you. Now what I do is I got small enough hands, so I'll take my pinky finger and I'm going to go inside there and I'm gonna work it in and out this way, and I'm also going to smear it in a circle and just really coat the inside of that really well. And if you've got bigger fingers, you can kind of get in here this way. You can flip it around, just really clean it up good. Now to conserve grease so that we're not wasting, one thing you can do is take what's left on your finger. We can set this aside. You'll see that it's still nice and thick in there. Okay, go ahead and take your towel, clean the top side of any excess grease, and just kind of clean along this little bottom edge here. Clean that up real nice. Okay, leave the grease for the inside. Set that to the side and take what's left on our pinky and go ahead and rub a little bit on the inside of this circle here. You'll notice the little indent in there. I like to grease that up quite a bit too. That way when these bad boys are running, They don't want to chafe or rub, or just that little bit of lube in there is nice to have. So basically that's it for our one-way bearing. Next, we're going to grab this little guy here, okay, and we're going to grease him up as well. Okay, so here we go, guys. We've got our main shaft extender here, okay, and basically all I do with this is I'm just going to take my grease and put one good little solid line across the top here, and just do it across this flatter surface. This bottom surface does not require any grease, and then basically use that same finger. Let's keep the same finger on this, that way we're not greasing up everything in the house, and just kind of smear it around, get a nice coating of grease on there. We're going to use this as we push it through the one-way bearing. That way as the grease seeps out the bottom from us pushing it in, we're going to add a new layer of grease as we slide this bad boy in, okay? Just keep your fingers nice and clean. It's a good practice, okay? You'll see we got a nice helping of grease on there. Now, go ahead and grab your one-way gear. You want the top side of your one-way bearing obviously facing up, and then we're going to go ahead and slide this in with the tapered edge going down. Go ahead and get that in. And guys, if it's having a hard time going, do not force it. One of your bearing sliders may be off, but it should go in nice and easy like this, okay? Now as we push it down, take note, we want to go ahead and come over here to the bottom, and we want to clean off all that extra grease that it just pushed out. So go ahead and grab your napkin, clean all that grease up real quick, make sure we stay nice and tidy, okay? Once that's all cleaned off, let's work some of that grease in. The way I do this is I usually hold it by the bottom here. That way I don't want to spin, or come off, sorry. And I'll just give it a couple spins this way. Make sure we're locking in the right direction. You'll notice we only spin clockwise, not counterclockwise. Give it a nice good couple spins. Also, work it up and down a little bit. Get that grease in there, guys. Just work it out. Okay, and now we're feeling pretty good. So let's go ahead and assemble the tail drive portion. Okay, guys. So now we're going to go ahead and assemble the tail drive portion, which should have a nice little helping of grease right down inside. Now make sure this grease isn't really heavy and gobby, just a nice thin little coat, just enough, just enough to get by. Now we've cleaned off our shaft here, okay, we cleaned it off with our napkin. At this point actually it's not too bad of an idea to leave just a little bit on there, and a small amount. We don't want to get too heavy on this, like one little drop. And then what I do is I just kind of rub it around, that way it'll slide into our tail drive gear nice and smooth. At this point, we're going to go ahead and add our little shim spacer. Do not forget this. You must have this on there. Let's go ahead and put that on. Make sure we're seated down all the way. Now, we're going to go ahead and do this gear portion here, and make sure it seats down all the way. This hole here, this very bottom hole, needs to line up with this hole here. Okay, so that's how we'll know that we're seated down all the way. So make sure you push it down nice and flush too. Don't force it in at an angle, otherwise you can actually ruin the plastic or the delrin of the gears. So go ahead and just sandwich them, push them all the way down, make sure that that one-way extender is all the way seated. And now the next thing we want to do is hold on to your bottom gear. Go ahead and do a nice little spin test, make sure everything's free, everything feels good. I always do a backwards pull test as well. You'll force it backwards and make sure that one way is engaging. Nice and smooth, everything looks good. Check your gear mesh as well. Those gears should line up nice and straight. And once this is done, you guys should be greased and good to go. Alright, so there we have it, you guys. We've got our main gear set up, fully greased and reassembled properly. A couple quick notes to go over with you guys before we end our video here. Make sure that it is free to spin. You don't want to hear any sort of clattering. The gears should not be rubbing on each other, and it should just have a nice silky smooth movement. This is very important. Also make sure that when you rotate it in the opposite direction that it bites down and wants to spin that bottom gear. That's how we know that our one-way is engaging properly. So as long as you've met these requirements, the greasing should be pretty good. I recommend you re-grease maybe every 30 to 40 flights, depending on how aggressive you fly. And as always, when you get a brand new gear setup, always repeat this exact same process. You don't want to throw a one-way bearing during flight. It's not much fun. So with that being said, guys, your gear should now be ready to assemble into your helicopter. And as always, I thank you for watching. I'll see you guys on video 2, and remember, if Freddy can fly, so can you.